Now in Borderlands 4 you're going to have a few tough decisions to make, but probably the most difficult one of all is going to be which actual character class to play as. All of them look absolutely amazing this time, but for this video I'm going to be going over Amon, why you may want to pick him, and personally why I think he's one of the coolest characters in the game. Now Amon, just from the looks of him, you can tell he has got a whole bunch of Viking vibes going on, with some technological aspects mixed right in as well. And just quickly recapping his backstory, Amon was raised in a vault monster worshipping cult until things went very wrong. One of the monsters got loose, absolutely devastated everyone in it, and Amon pretty much was the only survivor. Now because of this, he dedicates himself to finding and taking out as many vault monsters as possible. Now the awesome thing about Amon is that he's very skill based. If you like spamming skills, I'd say he's probably the best character in the game for that. And the next big decision you'll be undergoing is which tree to actually spec him into, because there's going to be 3 awesome ones, all with their own kind of unique benefits. Now the 3 skill trees that you're going to want to decide on how you allocate your points and which ones you're going to fully invest in is going to be your Vengeance tree, your Calamity tree and your Cybernetics. And of course, depending on which one you do start using, this is going to be accompanied by its own action skill. One that I think's probably going to be one of the most popular is going to be your Crucible. This is going to be attached to your Cybernetics tree, allowing you to wield fire and ice twin forge axes, throwing them out at your enemies, dishing out a whole bunch of damage that way, and depending on how you spec out, you'll also be able to do things like prime your enemies to deal out extra damage with your weapons or any special moves you'll be hitting them with. For your Vengeance tree, you're going to be using Scourge, and for this one it's going to be a little bit more on the defensive side, and you'll be using a Forge Shield in order to mitigate a whole bunch of damage, but also you'll be able to use it as vengeance and dish out damage back to your foes that you in turn should have probably taken. If you're all about being tanky and you want a ridiculous amount of survivability, this is probably the tree you're going to be going for. Then last but definitely not least, we're going to be going over the action skill Onslaughter, and this is going to be linked to your Calamity skill tree. If you like some of the melee based characters in some of the earlier Borderlands such as Brick, this may well be one that interests you, as you pummel everything with your fists of fire. This is going to be your up close and personal with an added touch of range, because you will be able to lash out and hit foes with range damage as well as you launch those fists at enemies that are a little bit too far away from yourself, dragging yourself towards them and doing extra damage. The great thing about Onslaughter as well is that you'll be able to dish out extra fire damage with your guns, gain some movement speed, and maybe best of all, also gain some constant shield regeneration. Now of course, being able to spam these action skills is absolutely amazing, and Amon is definitely the best for that. However, alongside this, he's also got another attribute about himself, and that's going to be his Forge Knight Vault Hunter trait. This thing is absolutely awesome. Not only can you use your skills, but now if you hold the button instead of tap it, you're going to be able to use a completely different skill, a more enhanced one in its place. Again, completely determined upon what original skill you've got equipped. If you've got the Onslaught action skill equipped, then instead you're going to be able to perform Molten Slam, doing a big area effect on the floor, a nice bit of damage, as well as some AoE to everything that resides within it. If you've got your Scourge action skill, then this one's going to turn into Firewall. Press and hold it, and this is going to mean that anything that goes through it is going to get a whole bunch of damage to it. But as well as this, absolutely awesome, you can use this hand in hand with your weapons, because now projectiles that pass through it, whether it be your own or your party members, is going to increase in damage, and as well as that, projectile speed. And as well as that, any absorbed damage is converted into Vengeance. Last but definitely not least, if you're equipping the Crucible skill, then whenever you're holding down the skill button, this is going to change into Double Edge. This time, instead of you chucking out Forge Axes, you're actually going to combine both of them together and throw out a twin Forge Axe at your enemies, dealing cryo melee damage to enemies that it hits, as well as incendiary melee damage on its way back. After looking at a lot of the skill trees, working out a few builds, and just everything that I think will be fun when the game first comes out, one of the things I can say is that Amon is going to be an absolute monster no matter what tree you pick, and he's going to be one of, if not the very best one for using your skills, especially for just how much you can use them in abundance. The only thing I would say, he's not going to be quite as powerful on the gun aspect side as some of the other players such as Rafa, which is going to excel in it, but by no means is he going to be awful on that side. He's just going to be a little bit more rounded as a character, using his skills very often before you start dishing out some gun damage. If you like some tankiness about your character, a whole bunch of survivability, but also just being able to wreak havoc on enemies with your skills, probably more so than any other Borderlands game, then Amon may be the perfect choice for you. Next up, I'm going to be giving a brief overview of the skill trees that you can allot your skill points into, and I won't be going over absolutely everything. I'll be giving you a little brief overview, what they're all about and what they'll bring to your build, and then I'll go over some of the most notable skill points that you can allocate, with those being your Augments, and of course finally your Capstones. First skill tree we're going to be looking at is going to be for your Calamity. Now, I'm not going to go over absolutely everything with the Calamity tree because it would take an age in this video. I'd probably bore some people, but instead I'm going to be going over why you may want to spec into it, and of course some of the most powerful perks you'll be able to grab on your skill tree which is going to be that of your Augments and of course later on your Capstones. Remember, you can only have one Augment available at one time as well as one Capstone, so these are something you're definitely going to want to work into your build in order to make it the most powerful. But for your Calamity, I would honestly say if you're picking this tree, it may well be because it's got the most going on with your melee damage, lots of ways to up it in that aspect, as well as one of the best ways further down the skill tree in order to activate all of your kill skills. So if you're all about that, this may be the tree for you. As well as that, like I said, some of the augments are absolutely awesome, and you're going to have to choose between Fellfrost, which when you follow up one of your rocket fists with an action skill, this is going to launch you straight at them, doing a whole bunch of damage. Then you're going to have Pyroclast. Whenever Amon activates Onslaughter, he's now going to fully recuperate all of his health and shield, as well as surround himself by an awesome Forge Storm that's going to do damage over time to anyone that goes near him. For Force of Nature, while Onslaughter is active, gun damage that's focused on them is going to start to prime them, and they'll detonate when they've been taken out or when they're hit with a Forge skill. Thermal Diffusion means that Rocket Punch is now going to have 2 modes to it, and is going to deal bonus damage depending on how much shield capacity Amon actually has, and the 2 modes are going to be your fire based one, and of course your cryo based one. And lastly, the final augment we'll be talking about is going to be Fulminating Fist, which is going to mean you'll get enhanced status effect chance whenever Onslaughter is active, and as well as that, you'll also be able to tap the button again that's going to send out a concentrated lightning wave classed as melee damage that's going to damage all enemies it passes through. All of these are awesome, you're going to have to pick the one that you want most, and as well as that, don't forget you've got 3 capstones to choose from. The first one is going to be Hawkleave. Instead of having your Molten Slam, this is now changed into Hawkleave, which is going to do a massive cryo wave, dishing out damage to enemies in a long line, kind of like an avalanche effect going on. Then for the next one we've got Stormcutter, where this time you're going to swing a huge forged sword, hitting enemies with a wave to deal shock damage. And as well as this, depending on how many enemies you hit, it's also going to reduce some of your cooldowns. And then finally, if you want to stick with a flame effect, you're going to have Molten Royal, which is going to give your Molten Slam an even bigger radius of effect, as well as store some damage after a short delay. This is going to be enhanced by your melee damage, and as well as that, you'll get extra damage on top the fewer enemies there are. Moving on to your Vengeance tree, and this tree is going to be absolutely phenomenal for anyone who wants a whole bunch of damage negation or reduction. Over to your Vengeance tree, and for this one we're going to have a massive amount of damage negation and reduction going on because of the shield you'll be using. This thing is the epitome of a tank build, and when you fully spec into this you'll be very hard to beat down, as well as being able to dish out a whole bunch of damage because of your Vengeance. Great thing about this, it's also really nice to give you some good elemental damage, especially I'd say if you're going for those cryo builds. And on top of that, enhancing your ordnance works out amazing, and you'll be able to dish out a whole bunch of extra damage with it, as well as be able to recoup it very nice and fast. Now for the augments, again you're only going to be able to choose one, but this has a load of really good ones to choose from once more. With the first one we'll be looking at will be Eternal Winter. Great for anyone who wants to restore some of your action skills, as now whenever you're using your Forge Waves you're going to dish out a whole bunch of damage, but as well as that you're going to restore action skill duration on top of this, as well as being able to activate your skill 3 times in a row. Stormlance is going to be one that will see your action skill turn into a huge Forge Spear that now in turn is going to deal shock ordnance damage, and as well as this it's going to be enhanced by Vengeance to dish out even more damage as long as you've got some. Then you're going to have Cryonic Thrum. This one, whenever Scourge is active you're going to be able to taunt enemies, so this one's absolutely amazing, I'd say, especially if you're in a team, because on top of this it's going to send out cryonic pulses that damage enemies that are close by you, but also allows you to heal some of your teammates with these pulses as well. Blast Chill is going to mean Forge Wave now consumes more Vengeance, but it also explodes on impact, dealing a massive amount of cryo ordnance damage, perfect for anyone that wants a singular big hit. And then finally your Molten Rebuke. Forge Wave is now going to turn into this, and you'll consume all Vengeance to throw out your Forge Shield, hitting the target for incendiary damage, but also able to ricochet off and hit other enemies as well, as long as you've got enough Vengeance to activate it. Of course, on top of that we've also got the Capstones. First one we'll be looking at is going to be Frostfire. Now your firewall is going to be a ring around you that deals incendiary damage to pretty much all enemies that are within it, and when enemies do walk past the threshold in or out they're also going to get cryo damage. And on top of this, it's also going to allow projectiles that go through it to deal extra damage as well as enhance its speed. Next we'll be turning your firewall into Wrathfall, and this one's going to change it into a massive Forge Sword, striking down the enemies in front of yourself, causing shock ordnance damage, and the great thing about this, it always critically hits. So if you're after one big chunky burst of damage, this is definitely going to be a good option. And then finally we're going to be going over Glacial Rapture. Now you're going to swing your Forge Whips and they're going to deal cryo ordnance damage over 2 hits, and then finally slam into the ground, leaving a cryo error effect on the floor in its wake. And for the very last tree that you'll be able to spec into, we're going to be taking a look at the Cybernetics tree, and a few things you'll be loving about this will be just how many times you can use your skill moves, as well as how many times you can actually stack damage, and also using your forge drones that can really help to take out some of the smaller enemies. If you're going far into this tree, you'll probably use them quite often. They're going to be awesome little melee drones that take out enemies all on their own, or at least dish out a bit of damage, and can really help out with some of the enemies, as well as priming the targets you'll be taking on. Over to the augments, and the first one we'll be looking at is going to be Hour of the Hammer, where Amon will ready forge hammers, either frost or shock, and enemies being hit by them again are going to be primed, and if you use a forge skill on them or defeat them, they're also going to detonate, giving a bit of AoE damage. Then for Endless War, primed enemies take increased gun damage, so this one's great for anyone who wants to run and gun, and it's going to apply for each stack of prime. Also, another cool aspect, if they are detonated, a forge axe is going to spawn that seeks out the closest enemy. For axe and stone, now you're going to be given movement speed when you do damage enemies with a forge axe, and detonating a flame axe restores action skill cooldown, whereas detonating a cryo axe restores ordnance cooldown instead. Jumping over to Blade Tempest, and this one now means Amon is going to ready a forge sword, either flame or shock, and when it's activated it will use all of its charges to land a barrage of them on a certain enemy. Doing this will prime enemies and again allow them to be detonated. And for the final augment, this is going to be Searing Cold. This will allow your axes to apply freeze whenever you hit your foes, and as well as that, flame axes now pass through enemies as well. Lastly, summarising the capstones that you'll be able to attach. First one is going to be Storm Surge. This means you'll be able to hold your action skill, and now it's going to do a twin forge blade that deals shocking melee damage in an area of impact, and also creates a forge storm at the point of impact as well, dealing damage over time. Then we've got Snowball. This means you'll be able to throw out a forge hammer, dealing cryo melee damage that can ricochet between certain enemies, and for each detonation it can also ricochet an additional time. And for the very final one, we're going to have Conflagrang. This is going to make your double-edged now deal incendiary melee damage, and this is going to go in both directions and also gain increased radius. And again, it's going to allow for detonations, and damaging enemies with the skill is going to help out with your forge skill cooldown. Hopefully, after seeing what Amon's about, you can see that this guy is going to be a lot of fun to play. You're going to be able to spam your skills very often with this character, very possibly more so than any other character that's ever existed in a Borderlands game. And if you like to put things like that into play alongside your gunplay, this is going to work out perfect. And then you've just got to decide what kind of build you want to use for him, as obviously you're going to have a whole bunch of options. If you want to build tanky and help with a little bit of support, you can easily go down the Vengeance tree. If you're after just a whole bunch of damage and you like some damage over time as well, possibly a little bit more edge towards that flame aspect, then Calamity is probably going to be your choice. Or if you want to go with the cool looking axes, throwing them out, priming your enemies, as well as dishing out a whole bunch of extra damage whenever you do start to bring out a lot of melee into it, alongside probably having some forge drones help you out in battle, then you may want to go down the Cybernetics path. But yeah, hopefully this helped a few of you guys and girls out. There's going to be a load more content away from me. As always, for all things gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.